All right. So can you see, do you see administrative, home, and a bunch of tabs across the top?
Yep.
All right. So this is LMP. So starting point for LMP is one of two things. Either the data goes through an API and a lead is created, or we import data manually through an import tool. There's also an option to do a data update as well, a bulk data update. And the way that those import tools work, you select the CSV file. Mapping to the fields that are in LMP, and then you can save it as a template. So then the next time so if there's something that you repeat over and over again, for example, when we process webinar leads and we import them into LMP, we have a specific template that we use for webinar leads. So we have the ability to save a template and import the data in LMP matching the fields. So after they're imported, there's a couple of different routes that we go. So the first, when a web lead comes in through, the web leads come in through the API call. So when somebody fills out a form, push those leads directly into LMP. And the way that I have the dialer initiative set up, which is what I'll take you into now. Actually, let me step back. So when a web lead goes in, there's a feature in LMP which is I think it's called like Call Now or something like that. And what it does trigger a call to this as soon as possible. And our sales people, or our business development people that operate in LMP, they operate within dialer initiatives, which is a bunch of, essentially it's a bunch of queries with rules that prioritizes who they should call and when. And when a web lead comes in, I don't know exactly what to call it, but it's like an automation tool called what they call ELF, Electronic Labor Force. And what it does is kind of like, if this, then that. If it meets this criteria, then do this type of thing. So what I'll actually do is I'll step you through this. So I'm going to create an ELF. What this option is, we always select company records, but this basically just says apply this rule to all leads in the system. This option here says initiate when record enters or exits the system. We almost always use enters. I don't think we use exit at all. And then termination criteria, you can ignore that one as well. What the interval type is after what I'll do after this is I'm going to find criteria that something has to meet. After it meets that criteria, it triggers something to happen. So this is to say you want to trigger something to happen and you want it to happen within X days, minutes. So in this case, I'll just select day and save it. And then basically what it allows you to do is go through the fields and basically just create a query. And when it matches all that criteria, it says, okay, now put them into this automation and do X. What the criteria is. And then there's also termination criteria. So for example, actually I'll do the termination criteria after I show you the action. So interval, the way that they do this is they just say, you know, one, add an action. Then we can say, push them to the top of the dialer queue. It's going to be flagged as a hot lead. And we want to push it to, these are a list of the dialer initiatives that we have at the from. And we're going to, as a new web lead comes in, we're going to push it to the top of the queue so it gets called as fast as possible. So that's what call now does. We have the ability to enter, you can add as many actions as you want. So what I did is I just selected day 2, and you can basically just keep adding a bunch, and it will fire as many things as you want. If I enter day 1, it'll fire it tomorrow. If I enter day 2, it'll fire whatever process I select for day 2, 2 days from now. So one of the other things, the initiation criteria. You can send an email, and they're the only things that we use. Send an email, change field value, and call now. So, for example, one of the things that we use this for an example, for send email, we in the future we don't want to use the system to do this, but when we put like cold leads in, for example, so in some cases I'll throw in 30,000, 40,000 leads, and we end up using this as an email marketing tool as well. And
still there, Andrew?
Yep, I'm here. Yep.
So you said you'll use it as email marketing for, like, when you import like 30,000 to 40,000 leads, you'll send a blast out that way?
Yep. So what we do is for the emails, we basically add an email in. We say send an email on day 1. You can create email templates, kind of similar to the way that we do in CRM with merge fields, and then you can set up day 2, day 5, day 10, and you build basically the whole email effort all at once, which is a bit of a pain in the neck. And basically what it does is you have to know the entire email effort that you want to send to these people up front. Can't add, it's not really easy to add emails later into like an email. We basically schedule 365 days worth of email marketing all at once, and it stamps the lead in LMP with all of those events. And we'll send out emails, and the only way to get them out of the ELF is with the termination criteria. So for example, with emails, we send emails and we integrated it with a tool called Mandrill, which actually sends out our emails, and when somebody clicks, it updates some data in LMP. When somebody unsubscribes, it updates some data in LMP. So for example, when somebody unsubscribes, we take them out of the ELF. So there's a field that gets updated that says, yeah, they unsubscribed, which triggers so basically this is the ELF is an automation tool that gives you a lot of control to be able to essentially kind of create like triggers and trigger events within LMP.
Got it. Got it.
Next, dialer initiatives. Dialer initiatives work. We create some rules around the actual dialer initiative overall, the overall setting. Us are who can use that dialer initiative, so the users that are in the system who's actually able to see it and dial from it. For the most part, I mean, at some point we can go through more of the details. It's really the most important part of the initial setup. So this section, this is kind of where all the logic exists. So as you go across the top, you have your time zones, your time set to say between 3 a.m. and 9 a.m. This is the logic for prioritizing leads from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. This is the logic for prioritizing leads. So when I go into one of these, it's essentially a query. Similar with the slight variations. So one of the things that we look for is a lead status to make sure that the person is still a good person to call, that it's not a bad phone number, that we didn't already talk to them and they said they're not interested. So we look for new leads and people that we're still trying to get in contact with. That's what this one says. This says number of dial attempts. It looks at how many dial attempts we made to the contact. Minutes since last call. This is just so that people don't keep coming in. We basically have control over how frequently they come back. So if we call them right now, we can say, you know, they'll drop back in an hour, they'll drop back in 30 days. Which time zone we want to call so that we're not calling the wrong time zones at the wrong time.
Yep.
The rest of the stuff, it's like I said, it's essentially a query. And what it does, so in this order, it calls this group first, this group second, this group third, and it basically just goes through the priority order. And then we can kind of shift these things around and change the order of who we want to call. As far as call recordings, we actually really modeled the CRM after this for call recordings, so it's very similar. Anything that is longer than X period of time we keep. Anything that's shorter than a period of time, the system will automatically delete it and the recording gets attached to the lead. So similar to CRM.
Yep.
There's a section in here that that allows us to add additional fields. See the edit on the right-hand side here. It's a drop-down field. You can add additional options as a drop-down field. This section here, so there's an admin layout and a basic user layout. We have the ability, depending on who is logged in, to have a different interface. It's not that part is not all that important. It's nice to be able to do that just because we can test. It gives us the ability to do some testing. But what is nice is we have the ability to you know, as we can add a new field, and then we can drop it onto the layout. We can move things around if the order's not right. So it gives us control over what the users are seeing.
Got it.
So after we dial, somebody within the dialer initiative is to, actually, you know what? Actually, it might be good. Let me see if I can. Let me see if I can go into the dialer. Our business development reps log in. They really don't have a whole lot of functionality outside of being of going into this outbound dialer tool. That they have to be assigned to, and so there may not be any leads in that one. I'm going to try a different one real quick. It'd be good if you could see it. Well, I guess as this is loading, so basically what it's going to do is it's going to pull up a lead screen, which will look as whatever information the business development rep needs to see. And here we go. Now I can select something else. Okay. So kind of similar to that lead screen that I just showed you. So then from within here, what they do is there isn't a scripting system in here, so we kind of came up with like a hackish workaround, and we created this field called messaging ID. And we basically just create HTML documents as scripts, so that when they click open script, it just opens up an HTML document that they use for the script.
Got it.
Scripting functionality. And what this does, so once they're actually in the application, it kind of forces them to follow a very specific structured process. So they have to dial. After they dial, they have to resolve a call, and then basically move on to the next step. So it just basically kind of forces them. You have to dial. You have to complete it before you can move on to the next lead. And it's just kind of a machine that allows them to move pretty quickly through the leads. And then after they talk to somebody and they agree to a trial, that's kind of where what we're doing right now comes into play. With the scheduler, we create a trial within LMP. We push the data through an API to create the trial in CRM, and then we get a URL. We get a URL back so that we can schedule it through the scheduler, and we push it onto the CRM calendar. So that's kind of the end of the cycle for the business development rep. I'm not even going to step through reports because they're terrible. they're just not accurate and they don't give us what we need. So we would have to think through exactly what's important to us. See if there's any. I think that really does cover majority of the functionality. Are there any questions that you have that I didn't go into enough depth on to give you just a rough idea?
I think I have a pretty good idea of what it is. So, I mean, so you have an administration tool where you define the prioritization, and that's where you're creating the different actions. And the actions could be an email, or it could be to bring them into the dialer here.
Yep.
Then, in terms of once it goes into the dialer, then you have different, by hour of the day, you have these different queries that are defining what's showing up in that queue.
Correct.
For each person, and the queues can be different. Then,
yep.
Then the business development reps are logging into the, they're logging into the really just the dialer. They're seeing the leads, and it's just telling them who to dial. They press a button, they dial. There's the recordings in the background. They can add, it looks like they can add some notes. They can result the call. They can use this, the APIs that we've built in the scheduler to actually schedule the calls. And again, and they're just running through and making the calls and dialing from there.
Yep.
What are some of the things that are driving you away from the system? Like what isn't working
well? Well, one of the things that creates a lot of complexity, we can't modify the data structure. And what happens, so like if somebody signs up for an ebook through a web form and then somebody signs up for a webinar, the only option that we have is to create another lead. So we keep creating additional leads, and it's to the point where if somebody, in some cases, somebody might sign up for 2 or 3 ebooks back to back, and it'll create 3 different leads in the system. And one, when the person's calling them, they're not aware because you can't consolidate all the information into a single record. And 2, we flag, right now, if something already exists in the system, we flag them as a duplicate and we just don't call them, which is really terrible because they're, we may have called them 6 months ago, and if they just attended a webinar, then hey, you know what? They're active again. They're visiting us again. They're a good customer. They're a prospect. But there's a risk allowing the system to put it in as a non-duplicate, because then if somebody signs up again, then you have 3 or 4 different leads of people calling on them. All 4 leads will go into the dialer initiatives. Different people could call them, and basically it just creates a lot of, you're entering data on different records, and the prospect is getting irritated because they're getting called 4 or 5 different times about different things from different people. So we can't consolidate all the information onto an account to make it simple. We can't report on any. We have no confidence in the reporting in this system. We create reports. They're not accurate. We can't get to the data we need. So we're essentially bottlenecked. And when we're asked to report on things, I mean, a lot of times it's directional, and in some cases it's an educational guess, but we can't get the data that we need out of the system. And we get support with InsideSales.com, who owns LMP, and we've exhausted our options. They can't deliver what we need. So that's a major, those 2 are major reasons why we want to get out of the system. There's probably a ton. There's a lot of little stupid things, like you can't, when I create an ELF, I can't use a text. I can't search a text field. I can't search the title field to look for specific titles within the database. I can't get the data out of the system unless I export it in small batches a little bit at a time. I probably could go on for a really long time, but
Yeah.
this application plugs into Salesforce. It's a little bit different than this, but I have no interest in continuing to move with this product in Salesforce, just from the sheer fact that we haven't had a good experience with their current product.
So on Salesforce, I know Salesforce doesn't natively have a predictive dialer. And I think you might have mentioned what's the tool you're looking at that ties in with Salesforce?
I'm actually going to talk with somebody tomorrow that is essentially like a Salesforce consultant that helps with build outs. I'm going to learn a little bit more from him tomorrow, but what I know from Salesforce that I like is, I think I mentioned some of them earlier, but you can create the data structure that you want, and it's pretty simple. You can add the fields you want. You can tie in with external applications. As you add new fields, they get added to the APIs. There's already technology built into it that's similar to the ELF in this system, where it's kind of like do this and that, change data, apply all these rules and actions within Salesforce. So where it doesn't serve as kind of like the core dialer, it doesn't serve the core dialer functionality natively. There's I started looking through a couple different applications that will allow us to tie into Salesforce. What I don't know is, just because it's on the app market, what I'm going to have to figure out is, just because it's on the app market doesn't mean you just install it and it works. There's obviously some setup and configuration and complexity to get things set up. So that's going to be a bit of a learning curve on my end. But really what I like about Salesforce is the flexibility with the way that it works to operate the core system around it. The core system operates very well. It's very flexible. It's very adaptable. You don't have to do programming. You have a sandbox where you can actually test things, and whatever application you plug into it, yes, there's going to be a connection and an integration, which can be a bit painful to set up, but if a product doesn't work, you don't have to mess around with the core components of Salesforce. You just have to deal with whatever the integrations were, and then you can, if you have to, you can try another solution, which doesn't have to monkey around with your Salesforce per se.
Gotcha. And you mentioned earlier that you plan on getting away from LMP and probably Salesforce too for the those bulk 30 to 40,000 emails. What tool are you thinking of possibly using there?
I think we just need. We've talked over and over again about marketing automation and the cost. With the way that we operate, if you throw 40,000, 50,000 cold leads into a marketing automation solution, you're going to be, if we throw cold leads into a marketing automation solution, one, we're going to be spending so much money that it's not going to be manageable. And two, I don't think we really need all the bells and whistles of a marketing automation system, at least for full prospects. For existing customers, at some point we may revisit that again. But so I think what we're looking for to replace the email effort out of LMP is an email tool that allows us to create a campaign, and then as the user behaves differently and clicks or to basically branch and route people to a different email series based on the way that they're behaving. So if we send them emails for 3 months and they don't open anything, then maybe that's the wrong one, and we shift them to something else, and obviously all through automation. Or if they click on something and it's a targeted email for something specific and we know that they're interested in something, then maybe we shift them and we push them down a route where it's more focused towards whatever they're interested in, for example. So as far as the options for that, we don't have a specific system looking for, but that's kind of what we're looking for it to do.
Yeah. So on that front, you're still exploring that. You don't need us to get involved in estimating that for the CRM or building any of that part into it. I think we've touched on that before, but you're going to look at some other tools for the email?
I think so. I don't know with the volume that we're doing and the yeah, I think it makes sense for when we're pushing that many leads into an external system. If we put that number of leads into CRM, it's gonna end up bogging down the system, and only a fraction of them actually become valuable. I don't think it makes sense to put them into our CRM system until they at least meet a specific amount of criteria. And obviously, there's going to be an integration point when they meet that criteria to get them into CRM.
Yeah, so I guess for me, one of the last things I want to understand is, so you have a lead, yeah, so you buy these 30,000, yeah, a list of 30,000 contacts. You throw them right now into LMP, and those are going on to, are you dialing those leads too, or are you eventually calling those leads?
So we did a couple different things. So what we're doing, I guess what we're doing right now is we're throwing them in there, and if they click, that ELF that I showed you where it pushes them to the top of the dialer, and they become a warm lead to start calling on. But for the cold leads that we're just email marketing, no, we're leaving them in there. We're email marketing them in LMP, and only calling the ones that actually act on the emails.
So what's the difference between, like, when you say a lead from the beginning of the discussion, we want to add leads into CRM. We're bringing, I know what a trial is. I know what the existing starting point is, but what's the difference between a lead in LMP and a lead in the CRM system once we build that out?
So I guess so I will call a list that we purchase that's cold. I guess they're really more of, a prospect. What would you call them?
If you're purchasing a list?
Well, I'll call them a cold lead. How about that?
Yeah, that's probably.
So they're a cold lead. So there's a number of different, I guess, kind of like classifications. So if somebody clicks an email, they become warm. Right now, they stay in LMP. If somebody attends a webinar, for example, somebody signs up for a webinar, for example, we break them down into groups. So if somebody signs up and doesn't attend, they go to LMP. They showed some interest. We got their information. They came to us. Have your people that attended, and they may go to the salespeople, or they may go to LMP. We've been basically shifting things around to figure out the right approach for this. So if somebody attends, then they may go one route or the other. And then we have people that attend and at the end say, hey, I'm interested, contact me. They're definitely the type of people that we would want to push to our salespeople. So basically what it is we have higher qualified leads. The people that show the highest level of interest are typically going to go to the salespeople. The ones that are colder or even warm are going to go to LMP.
I've got it. All right. So your business development reps, they're going after the colder leads, someone that might just download an ebook or something like that. At some point, they might hit a criteria that you want the sales reps to start interacting with these leads. that's when they get into the CRM as what we're calling a lead.
Yeah, and that's actually a major challenge too, because like right now, getting the data back and forth, communicating with LMP is there's only so many APIs and there's a lot of restrictions around what you can do with them. So one of the challenges we have right now, so what I mentioned earlier with the duplicates, we may have somebody in LMP that we put in as a cold lead, and maybe they click on an email, we call them, later they download an ebook, and then at some point, they attend a webinar, and maybe they want more information. Well, now it becomes a bit of a problem because the lead resides in LMP. The sales team doesn't have access to the LMP system, and I don't really want to have them have to learn another system. I really would rather not have them have to deal with that, because the metrics are in two different places. And now somebody that was being called in another system then hits a point where they're qualified to be called by a salesperson. And based on what we're saying, that would mean that they route to CRM. Now the data's in two different systems, and difficult to manage who should be calling what when.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to figure out too. So I mean, and I can see kind of how it could work, but even when you, like, if you go with the Salesforce example, we need to figure out the integrations, because if it, get away from LMP, it gets into Salesforce as a lead, then you'd need to, again, figure out whether it had already been escalated to a salesperson, because you don't want them jumping back into Salesforce to figure, multiple people calling this person. Same concept, just need to figure out how to route those to make sure that you know who's really owning that lead and where the information should flow to and who should handle it.
Yeah. In the ideal world, I really would love to have everything in CRM. I guess I just know how complex it is to create some of these things, and I know that we could probably eliminate some of it, but to rebuild some of these things, I think it would be a monster project.
Yeah, I know what you're saying, and that's what we'll figure out to see. Because you're right. I mean, a system like LMP, there's a lot. Yeah, there's a lot there that to do it one-off, custom, might not make sense if there's something else out there that works better.
Have you guys ever integrated any like dialer programs or anything into a CRM system for a customer or for yourself?
We have it. Not as complicated as what you have here. We did it ourselves in our old system. We had a dialer that would time with our phone system, and we even had some telemarketing reps for 3 months. Again, we didn't get into the same level of complexity as you have here with prioritization and the workflows. We've done that elsewhere, not with the dialing. So it's kind of like we've done both sides. We've done the ability to prioritize and put things in queues and figure out where they show up in the list. And then separately, we've built some dialing functionality. So this kind of brings those two things together.
Yeah. And I mean, there's another option in the back of my mind, which is kind of my last option. I would like to get out of LMP sooner rather than later. But the other option that we have to consider, and I know when we built CRM in 2000, I forget what it was, maybe 2000, I think it was 2013.
No. CRM? Yeah, because I started in 2012 and it was here.
That must have been 2011.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Times flew.
I tested it in 2011 the first time around.
Okay, so there you go.
Yeah,
so the other question in the back of my mind, is CRM the right system for us, and is moving to Salesforce a better option for us? So the other, I guess really the other question is, you know, I really do not want to rebuild what we've done. I really do not. But it's going to be possible to either get two different systems to talk to each other cleanly enough that it works, adapt CRM so that we can use CRM as the single system and then have a separate application that we can use as like a dialer, or, you know, are we kind of back to the drawing board with questioning whether CRM is the right solution for us moving forward?
Yeah, that's, you know, my immediate thought is, you know, we've worked with Salesforce and done some customizations to it. Like you said, you can do pretty much anything with it, but your CRM has a lot of logic that would be more complicated to build in. Yeah, a lot of things that we're doing in your system would be more complicated to build into something like Salesforce than what we did even starting from scratch. Because, I mean, you just look at the logic of trials and the MAAs and you can go through all that. Salesforce has no concept of any of this. So it would be, I'm going to assume, a pretty massive undertaking to take what you have now and put it into Salesforce, or you'd end up, you know, in a spot where you don't have as much of the logic, so you'd lose out on some of the advantages you get from building that in the way that you have it.
Yep. Yeah. So I mean, from that perspective, that's really not. If that was the route we wanted to go, we couldn't do it now anyway. So the complexity and the resources that we have right now. So I want to fully vet the other two options first. I really want to. My number one. If I had to pick a direction, I would love to get all the data in the CRM. I would like to get all the users in the CRM. I love having the ability to have access to the database to build reports. It gives me so much control over what I can do to have access to the database that, at least especially from a reporting perspective, which has really been a big challenge for us, that I would really love to get it in there. But I like the how we use like the ELF, and I guess I'm really going to have to think about what's important, what we actually would need to carry over. I mean, maybe it's simple enough that we say, look, we use these 4 or 5 things. It might just make sense to build them because I know to build. Have you built a tool like that before? I guess is a question. Something like the ELF. CRM.
Yeah. So we've built query builders before, and I can show you some of the query builders that we've built. They can be pretty complicated. Again, from what I saw with ELF, I think ELF might even be a little bit, another layer on top of that. So, we've done probably about 75% of it, and then put something on top of that where you can start moving creating multiple and shifting the priority is the piece that ELF looked like it did. That was something we haven't done yet, but not something we couldn't do.
Yeah. And so after we went through this process, I know that you probably have to digest it a little bit. Do you think that it's possible to get the data into CRM and kind of shape things so that CRM becomes the central database for all of this, and then integrate an external application? I mean, there's so many of them out there. I'm sure we could find one that would work. Do you think that would be a better option than integrating with another system, another database?
Yeah, I mean, in the ideal world, like I said, if you remove the cost of things, then that makes sense. But you need to consider the ROI, and that's where we need to go back and say, is this a massive job? Is it a big job? So that you can look at it and say, does it make sense, or do I do something like you're saying, where you use a tool that has a lot of it there, and it might not be perfect, but the time cost to build it might be cheaper. And that's where I don't know how big an effort it is until we sit down with with our team and kind of get our heads wrapped around it and come back and say, okay, here's how big the job is to build it all in the ideal way into CRM.
So what else do you need from me to provide? Have I provided you with enough direction to go back and kind of see if you can come up with some ideas, or do you need more from me before you can give a rough idea of an option?
The only thing that makes it, the things that can make it blow up in terms of cost, maybe, where I might, after we look at this, need some more feedback, is the tool this tool right here gives you ultimate flexibility with some of the querying tools and the ELF tools and things like that. And if there are things that you know of that could constrain that a little bit, because again, this tool is used by everyone everywhere for predictive dialing, and you might use a certain percentage of it. So even if on the ELF tool, if there are certain things that you don't use or don't need from what you've shown us, that we may come back and ask you for some of those types of things.
So would you say that would it be worth my time to go through and basically come up with kind of a pretty lengthy list of all the stuff that we use, and then kind of just rank them in priority order of how important they are to us to build?
I'd say not yet. I'd say let me start by giving you a rough idea of what it costs, and then if we're even in the same order of magnitude, then it might make sense to do something like that. So my guess is we're probably going to I'm going to base it off of what you showed us. My guess is we're going to come in high, and I don't know whether it's a little high or a lot high, and if it's a little high, then maybe we try and see if we can trim it down and still get the ideal single system. And if it's a lot, then we start looking at, start thinking more towards the Salesforce option.
Yeah, and one of the things too that the project we completed that could benefit us a little bit if we could make this work is the Twilio integration, because that essentially is tracking the majority of the metrics that we need from a reporting perspective. It's recording the calls, it's the actual dialing functionality, all that stuff. I think is already pretty much done. I mean, there may be a little bit of tweaks or something like that to making that serve as the dialer component. But at least from that perspective, that already exists in CRM.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think that makes sense. I think that's why I want to talk with our team to figure out how much of that we can reuse as well.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. So I think we have enough to get back to you with some preliminary ideas for what things cost, the next steps. It's Thursday now, probably by early, by say Tuesday of next week. I think we'll have we'll have an okay, again, rough estimates of things like the LMP, and and then maybe we'll set up a call for middle late next week, whatever would work for you, to go through what we found.
Okay, and then I guess what we'll do too is after we're done, I think testing the scheduler is going to take a while, just because the logic is a little more complex. So it's probably going to take me a little while to test that, roll it out, implement it, and then once I'm done that, then we can, then I'll start working on the project to push in the lead and convert a lead trial. So I think that's definitely going to be our next project for sure. It's just timing for us. So once I'm ready to go, I'll let you guys know on that one.
Yeah, and that's one where you can do a little more, like you said, spend a little time just to think of the fields, and the process of converting will help us spec that out.
Yep. Cool.
All right. Anything else for us today, Andrew?
That's it. Thank you very much for your time.
All right.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks, Andrew.
Have a good one.
All right,
You too.
bye.
Bye.